Welcome back to the Kicks and Picks podcast. Coach Steve here with Scotty and Nick. Coming off a winning week record wise, not much from the unit side, but 5-4-1. We bounced back from a losing week the week before. So, baby steps here, guys. Baby steps as we approach 2024. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas if you celebrate and are getting ready to start off a big winning 2024 in a week's time. But before we get there, we have some big matches to talk about. We're going to cover the Premier League. We're just about the halfway point in that league. Serie A a couple matches away as well. So, boys, hope you had a good Christmas, and I hope you're ready to give out some winners in our last match week of 2023.
Yeah, this time of year, it's all about survive and advance, both for the clubs themselves and for the guys that are betting on them. So 5-4-1 last week, not a terrible performance, all things considered, and we still have 15 plus matches in the Premier League to bet on, and then another 10 coming up in Italy. So lots of time left to make some units.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, dude. And it's like so many matches that I feel like this time of year it's a more condensed schedule than usual. I don't know. I think the league's probably made some adjustments, right? Because coach, back me up on this. Italy used to take off for like 3 weeks, right? Like around Christmas
did.
time.
They used to be a couple of years ago. They changed it to a more Premier League setting, not like as congested as the Premier League, but they used to be more on that like La Liga schedule and the Bundesliga where they would take those couple weeks off around the holidays. Now it's jam packed.
Is it because we have Europa in the summer? Not Europa, excuse me, Euros in the summer. So they're trying to like condense the season.
I don't know if it's for ratings wise because they've been doing it for a few years now. I don't know if they just feel like it's a good time to get people to tune in because less people are working. Yep. I think it could be that. This year it works out pretty well for them where it's like right before the holiday. They play a lot of Saturday matches, so I don't know, but it's good for us. Keeps us involved, keeps us interested. If I know for me as a Roma fan, it's a lot of big matches in a short time, which keeps it even more interesting. So I enjoy it. Those midwinter breaks, holiday breaks are kind of a bummer when you're off from work and you have the time to watch and you can't watch them.
No, and I was going to say like I got exciting. We had Boxing Day. I mean that round of fixtures is currently taking place as we're recording this. I'm bummed that we didn't cover those because I went 4-0 yesterday. It's like my best day in a very, very, very long time. So
I have mixed feelings on yesterday, Nick, because I told you guys I had a little parlay. DraftKings had a 33% boost on a single game parlay or single game parlay plus. And with football, it's hard to get 3 legs. So I had Bournemouth money line, and I parlayed that with Villa double chance and under 4.5. And Villa was up 2-0 at halftime, and I thought I was money. It was like plus 280 or something. It was something pretty solid with a boost. And lo and behold, it was just the Garnacho show in the second half. Villa capitulated, and it kind of ruined my Boxing Day.
Well, I think that's a beautiful introduction into our buy or sell because I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's you're right, Nick. I think it's a good way to segue into it. I mean, where we're at now, we just talked that we're still recording in the middle of the Boxing Day fixtures, but after these games wrap up, we'll be at the midway point for the Premier League season. So doing a little special buy or sell this week, just kind of doing a look at the storylines for the first half of the season and where you guys and where we think the dust will settle when May comes around and the table becomes more finalized. So we'll kick things off with Aston Villa. First buy or sell. Aston Villa currently sitting in, I believe, third place in the Premier League table. Yep, third place. Currently 1 point back behind Arsenal, and they are 5 points ahead of Manchester City in fifth place. I think we've written off Aston Villa as title contenders for now, but do you guys buy or sell them as Champions League qualifiers come season's end?
I'm buying it for now. And even though they left a sour taste in my mouth yesterday, I do think that hurt their title chances, like you said. But when I look at the clubs below them, besides City, obviously, who has 2 matches in hand and will probably at some point lap Villa when they get those matches played, they could go up by them by a point. I don't think they're there with Liverpool, Arsenal, and City in terms of the longevity of being able to fight for a title to the very end. But you look at Spurs, they've come down to earth. I just saw they lost Romero for a few weeks now. So there goes their probably best center back for some time. We know the other injuries they've dealt with. United did get the big win against Villa yesterday, but are they good enough to make up 8 points? I honestly don't know. I mean, we saw what Villa did to it was City and Arsenal just a couple weeks ago. When they're at home, they cook, right? They keep teams bottled up. And at home right now, they're still 8 wins and 1 draw, unbeaten, which is huge for them. So if they can keep up that home form and just continue to do what they've pretty much done on the road, which is play 500. Winning percentage football with their 4-2-4 with the two being the draws. I think they do have enough. But the only thing that would concern me is like a match like yesterday. You're up 2-0 and you couldn't lock it down, even hold them to a draw at that point. They couldn't lock it down at 2-0, couldn't lock it down at 2-1, even 2-2. That's my only concern. But I do think at the moment I would buy them as a top 4 team with half the matches played in the Premier League season.
So this is eerily similar to the buy or sell we had on last week's show when we talked about Napoli missing top 4. And I think Scotty jumped right in and was like, I've been trying to buy this all season. But then you kind of look at what else, the circumstances around it. And first glance, obviously yesterday's result is fresh in our mind. They had a terrible draw to Sheffield United at home the week before. And, they have subpar games. We've seen them kind of do it against Bournemouth. We've seen a couple of stumbles here and there. Right. They lost, I forget who else it was, or maybe it was that draw against Wolves. Like they're not handling the quote unquote bottom teams. Right. But then coach mentioned you go out, you beat Arsenal, you beat City in back-to-back weeks. So who is the real Aston Villa? I guess 12 wins through 19 matches is great. I'm on the fence with just the team itself because I don't think they have the offensive firepower. I think, they've been doing well. I mean, they've scored 40 goals, right? That's top of the league. But I just feel like a lot of those were like, they had 6 in one game. They had 5 in another. I think they had 6 or 7, maybe even in the third game. So I think those numbers are just a little bit skewed. But then you kind of look at what else is going on. So we have Liverpool and Arsenal. I think we're all going to pencil the two of them in. City is in 5th currently, but they have 2 games in hand on Villa. I think it would be a shock for City not to be in the top 4. So now you're fighting with Tottenham, United, West Ham, Newcastle, Brighton. And I don't know. I think Villa's kind of built themselves up a little bit of a cushion. Whereas if they can just start taking care of the Brentfords and the Crystal Palaces and the Evertons of the world, man, it's definitely theirs to lose. So I'm going to buy that it's Villa's position to lose. I hope that's a fair statement to make.
Yeah, Nick, I think you had a good callback to our episode last week because I think my answer is going to be similar to what I said about Napoli, where to me, it's like if you're going to sell Villa falling out of the top 4, you have to buy somebody else to climb into it. And so, like I said, with Napoli, is like, who are you going to pick from those teams right now that are in, 5th to 9th place to jump them? So for me, like, I think if you're going to buy Aston Villa in the top 4, you have to sell probably Tottenham and United to miss out. I think that's okay. And I think the reason why it's okay is because Tottenham are in for a really rough January. So we know that the injuries that coach just mentioned, Romero is going to be out now. They're also going to lose the rest of their midfield with Basuma and Pape Sarr is going to AFCON. Son is going to be going to the Asia Cup. So I think January is going to be a really tough period for them. I think they're probably going to drop some points. They're probably going to drop a lot of points in January. I think they'll get healthy in February, and in March, they'll probably make their run. They don't have any sort of European competition to worry about. Villa does. So maybe that's where Tottenham kind of makes it an interesting competition. But the way that Aston Villa are playing right now, it kind of reminds me of like an earlier year of Klopp's Liverpool, where they have a really strong attack. They can score goals, but their defense just isn't quite keeping up. So it's a really fun team to watch as like a neutral. You get to see lots of goals. It's usually pretty, back and forth like we saw against United, where, unfortunately for Villa, they conceded a 2-goal lead. But I think that kind of play is usually good enough to get you to the top 4 in the Premier League, but it certainly is not good enough to make you a title contender. Usually you need to have that defense. And I think that's where, City right now is honestly falling short too. Their defense is not as good as it has been in years past. And although they have Haaland and they're going to be getting back De Bruyne and they're going to score goals aplenty, the defense is not as solid as it needs to be a title contender in the modern day Premier League. So I do buy Aston Villa to wrap things up as a top 4 team. I think they'll get through just because I think Tottenham are really going to struggle in January. If it wasn't for this January period for Tottenham, I think they would probably still be able to scrounge it out. But I think, like you guys said, Aston Villa is going to build a really big lead. March, Tottenham will try to make the run, but I don't know if it'll be enough time.
I think good call out too, right? European competition, right? Villa is going to have aspirations to go pretty far in the Europa League.
think they're Conference League, right?
Conference League. Sorry,
Conference League.
So,
Yeah,
like,
so that's a
even
competition where they
easier.
can probably rotate a little bit in the earlier knockout stages. If they run into like a Fiorentina or I think is it Frankfurt, who's the German side that's in the competition, like one of those sides, maybe then they have to play a little stronger lineup, but usually can avoid that until like the quarters or the semis. So they've got a pretty good path in Europe too compared to some of those other sides. Yet Spurs doesn't have that, but like Scotty said, there's a lot of injury issues with Spurs. And
United doesn't have it either, coach. Just I'm throwing that out
United
there.
no longer has it. That
Yeah,
is true.
yeah.
That what a travesty, right? That they don't have it. But no, I do think, like I said, I think Villa is building up that cushion. And that's what's so big for them. If they could have gotten a draw yesterday, United would have been like 10 points back or something. So hurts a little bit, but I think maybe this will be a learning experience for them. Maybe it's something they can take away from it and how to manage games moving forward, especially against the big sides on the road. Look, if you build up a 2-0 lead, you cannot blow that if you're a Champions League qualifying team. You can't let it happen again.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say, which leans more to the buy side, if you're looking between Villa, Tottenham, United, West Ham, Newcastle, Brighton, like Emery is the best coach. He's the most established coach there. I think that's going to make the difference. You could say whatever you want about Ange. He's doing really well with Tottenham, but Emery's kind of in a class all of his own, right? His results, his track record speaks for themselves.
Yeah, I would say he's definitely the most experienced and established. I think there's obviously a potential with Ange come 2 or 3 years from now that his, heights will be higher than Emery's heights, but too soon to tell on that. We'll have to give him a couple more years, but we'll move on. So speaking of Europa League, my next buy or sell for you guys, we talked about, those top 5 teams between Liverpool, Arsenal, Villa, Tottenham, and City. It usually means you got about 2 spots left for Europa League. Right now, we got a pretty close heat between 4 clubs, United, West Ham, Newcastle, and Brighton for those 2 spots. But the 2 that I want to talk about in this one, United and Newcastle, do you guys buy or sell either of these to be Europa League qualifiers come season end?
I'm buying United over Newcastle, and it really, really, really pains me to say that because we hate United and we love Newcastle. But Newcastle is in free fall, and I just don't see any end. I don't remember. Granted, we talked about it, right? They had a brutal schedule. They were in the hardest Champions League group, but they just can't seem to get anything going right now. I think it's a mixture of personnel. I think it's a mixture of injuries. It's a mixture of they probably overperformed a little bit last year. I mean, it's kind of like Lazio and Serie A, right? I mean, different, but the same in the sense that they overperformed last year. And I think the league is just a little bit tougher, right? And United, to me, I don't want to say they're riding the ship after one win, but I just feel like they have a stronger roster. We could joke about players. Certainly, there's a lot to be desired out of their forward lineup right now, but you saw like a game like yesterday, Garnacho, man, that dude is a baller. He could win a game by himself. And I don't know that Newcastle has anybody like that. I think Isak has looked good, but it's still really his first full healthy year in the Premier League. And he hasn't even been healthy all year. So I just kind of worry who's going to carry Newcastle, I think. And maybe my answer is different after the January transfer window because these are 2 teams that I expect to be active. United because they have to be, and Newcastle because they have all this money. But let's see. I think right now, I think United is just in a little bit better position.
So we are going off the assumption that only 5th place gets Europa League right now. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I'll say
unless one of the top 5 wins which cup?
Well, I'm going off the assumption there's going to be 2 teams that make Europa. Do you think that these, because even if we assume that top 5 go to Champions League, you still need to have 2 spots between those other 4 clubs?
Well, because in the Premier League, one of the Europa League spots is cup tied, right? Unless one of those teams wins something. Like the FA Cup, or is that how it works in Premier League? I know it's different in every league. Like I know Serie A, one of their spots is tied to the Coppa Italia, but usually like 6th place gets it because usually one of the top 5 teams wins the Coppa. So if we're saying like one of these teams finishes top 6, I guess we'll say to get that Europa League spot, it's hard. I agree with Nick. I think it's hard to trust Newcastle right now, team of the pod, but I'm concerned for them. Because even when I look at the table and I see that Spurs is at 36 with 18 matches played and Newcastle's down on 29 with 19 matches played, that's another team they're going to have to leapfrog at some point. West Ham still has a match in hand, so they could technically be 4 up heading into the midway point, which I'm not saying West Ham's going to stick around, but it's still another team you have to deal with. And United, maybe, like Nick said, I also agree. I don't think you can go off of a one match, turn the season around performance, but I think the way they came back yesterday will have them energized a bit heading into the match against Forest on the weekend, on Saturday. And look, then they have Spurs head to head. That'll kind of be a telling thing for them. But I'm starting to believe that Newcastle's in more trouble than United right now, I think is what it comes down to. I think at the moment, January transfer window, Nick made a great point there. Who does more, who reinforces, maybe that makes a difference. But in terms of results right now, Newcastle very worrisome. I've completely stopped betting them the past few weeks because as good as they were to us the past couple of years when we've gone to them with good lines, they've been very inconsistent and unreliable lately. And I think if we're looking at, only one of these teams gets in through the league route and somebody else gets in through the cup route or whatever, I don't see Newcastle finishing top 6 right now. I don't. I think Spurs and United are ahead of them besides the other 4 teams we mentioned in the Villa piece.
Yeah. And just to kind of nail down that point, Coach, December has been a terrible month for Newcastle. They started the month okay. They had a 1-0 win against United at home, but then they followed it up with a 3-0 loss to Everton, a 4-1 loss to Tottenham. They lost to Milan in the Champions League. Then they did beat Fulham 3-0. So that's their one good mark for the month of December. And then the last 3 matches have been when they got eliminated by Chelsea in the Carabao Cup, and then a loss at Luton Town, 1-0, and then a loss at home to Nottingham Forest, which weirdly enough might even be the worst of the bunch. So form has certainly been a problem. The funny part is I kind of do agree with you guys where it seems like United is the most likely of the two to make Europa. Yet all the chatter we hear about managers right now is that Erik ten Hag is the one that's on the hot seat about to get fired, and there's not been a word written about Eddie Howe and his potential job security.
I think he's kind of got himself a grace period after last season, right? Because this is a club, they're a historic club, but they haven't had the success in a really long time that United has historically. And I think Ten Hag came in with a lot more fanfare than Eddie Howe, and kind of Eddie Howe right now, I'm sure to some extent still with Newcastle faithful. And I'm sure, I'd love for people to weigh in on Twitter or social media, let us know if this is accurate or not. But I think he's still in their good graces after what he did last year because he took them to the Champions League, right? When they were in the Champions League for like 30 years or something. So I think that buys a manager some time. I think maybe the ownership understands, look, this is our first year back. We haven't played the Champions League. It wore the squad out. We got to do more. If they finish like 10th, will he still have the good graces by May? I don't know if that's, going to be viable still. But I think at this moment, I think United fans are expecting more from Ten Hag, especially after last year when they made that push for the title for quite some time. We thought they were in the mix until probably February, March last year. They destroyed City and we're like, wow, maybe this United is turning it around. So I think that could play into it too, where it's like the Yankees in a sense where and Nick's an Orioles fan, right? If the Orioles make the playoffs like they did this year, a manager's going to have a lot more leeway the next year than the Yankees completely capitulating. I mean, Aaron Boone's still a manager, so maybe it doesn't ring as true as like the
that's
late
exactly
90s, early
true
2000s,
with this.
right? Maybe it doesn't ring as true as, but Ten Hag's still got a job. Aaron Boone still has a job. I don't know if this is like an apples to apples comparison, but I think the mindset of the fans and the history behind the club and things like that kind of give a manager a little more leash, so to speak.
So here's what I'll say, and I agree with your points, by the way. I think Scotty hit the nail on the head a couple things. Last year, they were in the title race for a very long time because of how good Rashford was over a 2-month span. But right now, and listen, I understand expectations are different for Manchester United, right? Like that's just, you mentioned the Yankees. It's like the Yankees. He only has 2 less wins than Liverpool, than Arsenal, than Aston Villa. He's level on wins with Manchester City. What exactly is he not doing well? I mean, I get it. The Champions League was a disaster. I understand that. They are losing a lot of games. I understand that, but this isn't
a way to draw those losses.
This isn't exactly a superstar Monstars lineup. Like
that's the real point. It's
Yeah.
what Ten Hag is accomplishing with the roster he has and the turmoil. It's not just the talent, but it's also like the attitudes and like the
Yeah.
locker room issues that have plagued United for years, multiple managers.
Yeah.
Like it's just very like ironic that he's the one in the hot seat, despite the fact that all those points you just made, Nick, like he's doing really well considering all the strife he's had to deal with outside of, actual game planning and management.
Yeah.
I
I
will
saw
wrap our
a graphic too, Scott, since you're on the Liverpool side. His first however many matches he's been in charge, I don't know if it's like 50 now or 60, whatever it is. They compared it to Klopp, and it's fairly similar to Klopp's first 2 seasons at Liverpool, which shows that he's maybe not doing as bad of a job as people are making it out to be. And I think, like you mentioned, Rasmus Højlund, that was his first goal yesterday. He got the winner that propelled them to victory, but they spent 75 million pounds or whatever it was on this guy, and he's got 1 goal. I mean, what else can he do? Rashford's not scoring. Ten Hag can't put the ball in the net either.
Yeah. Well, coach, that kind of segues into my last little point that I'll wrap up here. You guys brought up the January transfer window. Who's going to spend most between Newcastle and United might be the difference in who gets that Europa League spot. I think the assumption fairly is that Newcastle has the funds and they have a virtual league that they can use to draw from. Watch out for United in the January transfer window because they did just complete that Ineos takeover. 25% of the club was sold to Ineos and Sir Jim Radcliffe. He's also taking over control of the operations of the club. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it wrapped up the week or two before the January transfer window opened. I think that's kind of a hint that there's going to be some changes coming in January and maybe more than what we're accustomed to with a mid-season transfer window. All right. We will wrap up our cover of the mid-season Premier League review with one last buy or sell. This was going to be our favorite club to watch right now and potentially laugh at and take enjoyment of. But do you guys buy or sell Chelsea right now, finishing in the top half of the table? I'm not even talking about qualifying for Europe. We're just saying they're going to be a top 10 club in the Premier League. Buy or sell that given everything that you've seen so far this season?
Man, I really, 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 really want to sell it. So they're in 11th. They're on 22 points. Bournemouth is in 10th on 25. Brighton in 9th on 27. I want to sell it because Chelsea is not doing anything right. I think for all the money they've spent, they still look like a complete disaster. People probably had different expectations with Poch coming in, but this Jackson guy hasn't really played all that much, right? He's been hurt or suspended or something. I don't know.
About Nkunku? Jackson has been playing. He's the one that's been missing.
Is he just the one not scoring? Okay.
He's
no,
terrible.
Nkunku, I know, just had his first game back, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a big boost for them. Sterling is awful. I mean, that dude just good for him in the early career that he had, and he made an impact at Liverpool and that City. He's not it anymore. I think for all the money they've spent, they still can't score goals. And they can't seem to stop them from going in this year, right? They have I think an even goal differential. So I really want to sell it, but I have to imagine that they still will go out and buy 1 or 2 guys. They'll have to start to right the ship a little bit. I like Bournemouth, great story, but I think Chelsea probably have to overtake them. And it wouldn't shock me to see a West Ham and Newcastle of Brighton to drop some points. I think they have to finish in the top half of the table. I can't see a scenario where they don't.
Yeah, I agree. As much as I'd love to see them finish 11th or worse where they're sitting right now, just to kind of continue this story that's been going on for a year and a half now. I don't think it'll happen. They're only 3 behind Bournemouth, and Bournemouth is playing really well right now. Can they sustain it? I don't know. I think Nkunku will help, like Nick said. They've scored a decent amount of goals at 29. It's right up there with like the West Hams, and it's more than United and clubs like that. And their defensive record's not much worse than the teams around them. So I think talent at the end is going to win out to 10th at worst. I do think they pass at least Bournemouth. I don't see Wolves or Fulham or any of those clubs passing them at this point. So I think they're 10th at worst. I think maybe they can slip up to 9th if Brighton or some of those teams slip up a little bit. Maybe West Ham makes a deep Europa League run and has to sacrifice a little bit in the league or something. Maybe they slip up a little bit, but I think considering they're only 3 behind Bournemouth, I can't see them finishing lower than 10th. So top half, I buy.
Yeah. I will say there's one dark horse that could kind of ruin this. I will also buy them finishing in the top half by the skin of their teeth in 10th. But I think the club that's actually going to challenge them the most for that 10th spot is Everton.
Well, is there any appeal? I was just thinking that as you were saying that, I knew you were going to go to Everton. Like, is there an appeal for those 10 points? Is there any recourse they could get any of it back? No.
I don't think so. I think they're actually, oddly enough, they're more concerned about making sure that they don't get another 10 points because they have similar financial issues for the year following the year that they got docked for. But it should be okay. But if you do give them those 10 points, they're on a 52 point, per season pace right now. So that would put them around 42 at the end of the season. Chelsea right now on pace for 44. So they'd be neck and neck coming down to the wire for the last match. But Everton have also been in decent form lately. I think we kind of talked about it a couple weeks ago, but Dyche has really gotten his footprint on the squad now. They're playing in true Dyche fashion. And so this 52 point pace is already pretty good. I might expect that to be closer to like maybe even a 60 point pace in the second half of the season, which would be a really, really good turnaround for Everton, considering where they were the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, good on them. 8 wins already. Similar to United, they don't draw games. They only have 2 draws. So interesting team to watch. I'm like, they're one of those teams. They're like United. Like the league is better when like Everton is interesting. You know what I mean? Like, they've been kind of in this relegation form, but now like knowing that they can go out there and anything could happen any given match, I don't know. It's a lot more fun. It's harder to bet on, but
yeah, I enjoy it just because they now take points off of other top 6 clubs.
Right.
Even when they're terrible, they can still take points off of Liverpool. It's their Super Bowl. So now that they're actually decent enough to like threaten the Uniteds and the Tottenhams here and there, like at least it levels Liverpool's playing field a little bit.
I don't want to speak for coach, but I definitely thought you were going with Wolves when you said that, because Wolves have also been pretty good.
No, I thought of Everton right away just because I knew they had the 10-point deduction. They've been playing well. Just to give some betting angle to this, since that's what we're all about. If you look at to finish top 10 right now, team futures, the team with the, Chelsea's minus 600 to finish top 10. And then it's West Ham minus 285 and then Bournemouth plus 250. So the team they see being out of the top 10 is Bournemouth, as we discussed. And the books see Chelsea finishing ahead of West Ham. And then just to give a little angle to our other 2 points we were making, Spurs is still slightly ahead of Villa in the betting side of it, plus 100 to plus 110. So the books see those two battling it out for 4th position. And then top 6, right now, Spurs is locked in as the 5th favorite. Newcastle plus 100, United plus 150. So just to give those some context in terms of betting lines.
There you have it. I mean, you can't argue with the books. They know
never
everything. All right, Coach, you want to take us into your club, Roma, playing Juve this weekend?
All right, yeah. So Roma coming off a big win against Napoli at home. The monkey on Roma's back this year was they couldn't beat another team that's battling for top 4 European
this
places.
Year?
Well, they beat Juve last year and Inter last year. So
how'd they finish?
It's been a problem for them under Mourinho. This year, it's their first one against the top 4 type side. So yes, it's been a problem for 2 years, but this is this was the first one this year, to give it some context. So Roma with the win jumps up to 6th in the table on 28 points, 3 off of Bologna, who's 4th, 2 off Fiorentina in 5th. Juve still standing strong in 2nd place, 4 points off Inter on 40. Very comfortable in 2nd. Milan 7 behind them in 3rd place. So this is a match where I think we'll get into it. I'll give the betting lines first, but Juve plus 105 at home, big favorite. Draw line plus 200. Roma plus 285. Roma on the draw, no bet, is plus 170. The over-under here really is, you got to look at the Asian money line to get any real context here. Over 2 is minus 105. The under is minus 135. So like the over-under 2.5, unless you think there's goals to be had, you can't go under, and the over 1.5, no value there. So it's really got to look at the Asian line for that. Both teams to score at plus 120. The no is at minus 160. So I think rightly so, knowing Allegri and Mourinho, the line is set low at 2 pretty much. The both teams to score being plus money is very interesting as well. It's not often you see 2 top 6 type sides going head to head and seeing both teams to score at plus money like this. I'm not surprised that Roma's a pretty big underdog at the Allianz. It's been a tough place for them to play historically. But Nick, does this surprise you? Anything about these lines surprise you? Let me ask you that first.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Both teams to score being such a big number jumped out at me. But then I think if you kind of take a look at the teams, you take a look at the context, past performances, and I'm not looking at the past performances right now, but I imagine a lot of 1-0 wins and dirty, disgusting games with a ton of cards. But then I started to think, well, who's really scoring the goals, right? We have Dybala may or may not play, may or may not feature for 90 minutes. Steve, you could speak to that more than I can. Lukaku's kind of cooled off. I think he did score last week, which was good for him, but definitely has cooled off a little bit. We talked about Pellegrini and his struggles. So I don't really know what kind of lineup I'm going to get out of Roma. I think that lends itself there. Juve, same type of thing. Listen, we have been praising them and Max pretty much all season. They're doing a fantastic job with another below average squad, if we're being honest. But they're not really getting strong goal contributions from anybody, right? Regularly. Vlahovic, his first goal in 2 months, I think last week. Chiesa hasn't really been doing anything. They're, guys coming off the bench, Milik and Keane, haven't done anything. They're relying on an odd goal from a midfielder, from a defender, off of a set piece. They do really, really well with set pieces. So you start to think about it, and then I think back to the last 2 or 3 weeks where I took like a Roma and both teams to score, and they've let me down. So I think that plus 120 number is kind of dangling out there for somebody to be like, oh my God, this is great. And it'll wind up not hitting. So that's kind of, I think the over-under is probably spot on. Like, again, I want to take the over. At least at 2, it's kind of safe where you could see a 1-1 game, a 2-0 game, but it's really tough to play a total in this one. And I think, unfortunately, it's probably too early to look at any card lines or anything like that. So tough one to make from a total, from a prop standpoint. I think it's a lot clearer when you're picking a team to win. I will reserve my thoughts because I do have a play, but I want Scotty's thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think when I see a match like this, I try to read between the lines, pardon the pun. But at face value, I would think Juve would be a bit heavier of a favorite here. But seeing them money line plus 105, try to figure out why that might be the case. And I think it really just comes down to the fact that they do see this being a very goal scarce type of match. So they're figuring that like the draw here might be a heavy possibility.
Very low draw line. I'm sorry, just to interject. You plus 200 is like nothing. Yeah. You're usually seeing a plus 265, plus 270 minimum.
Yeah. And so one of the things I kind of look at, we know this is going to be a defensive game given the two managers and their style of play. Interesting little bit of odds that I looked at just to kind of get an edge or a sense. First goal. They have Juve at minus 140 as the favorite to score first, Roma plus 150. And I think this is a kind of a match where if you're the team that scores first, you're probably not losing. Like, I don't think any team is going to come from behind here and get all 3 points. So, knowing Allegri, if they score first, God, it's going to be however many minutes, if they score in the 10th minute or the 80th minute, it's going to be full defense from there on out. And probably likewise for Mourinho. So, I do prefer probably Juve as like to win. If I had to pick someone to win, I go certainly Juve on this, but the draw line to me is very enticing because it does feel like it's going to be one of those matches where even if you see someone score in like the 10th or 20th minute, like it's just going to be an all out attack from the team that's behind. And it's just a matter of if you can get that equalizer or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to give some context at that point, with the first team to score, Juve is unbeaten in their last 12 in the league. A couple draws mixed in with the wins. I don't have exactly how many wins, how many draws, but they are first to score in their last 10 matches, which speaks to why they are unbeaten in their last 12.
Good bet.
And Roma's first to score in 5 of their last 7. So first goal, I think, is huge. I talked about this on my Roma podcast last night. I think Roma needs to score first if they want to win. But I think first goal, like to Scott's point, probably guarantees at least a point for either side, because I don't see either side kind of capitulating once they're up. The managers, the lines are set the way they are because we've seen these Mourinho Allegri matchups before, right? And this is kind of what they produce. There was one kind of like, can't think of the word I'm looking for, but like it bucked the trend a couple of years ago in Rome when Juve came back from down 3-1 against Roma, won 4-3. But other than that, the other 3 head-to-heads between Allegri and Mourinho in the last 2 years that he's been at Roma, 1-0 Juve in their first matchup. Then it was that 4-3. Then it was 1-1 at the Allianz last year in August, early in the season. And then Roma won in Rome 1-0 back in March last year. So it's been very low scoring, very tight. In some ways, I think that plays into both managers' hands because they don't really have to worry about a high attacking side going and pressuring their back line a lot. I do think it maybe plays in Roma hands a little bit more because they can be a little more fragile than Juve at times. And I don't think they have to worry about the kind of attack that can really give them trouble if Juve is not, with their best player. So Chiesa is questionable for this one. I saw he's back in training, but who knows if he starts. I saw Locatelli is also questionable. He's kind of got that long distance shot, which I've seen give Roma some trouble in the past. He had one call back by VAR last year from distance to try to draw that Roma back line. So I think it's be very interesting. You mentioned Dybala. He is back in training. Does he start? Probably not. He's probably coming off the bench. He's probably that wild card for Roma. Maybe Chiesa ends up being the same thing for Juve. I don't know. But without those two, it's going to be really hard for either side to, I think, hit on the counterattack too, which really plays into this low scoring 0-0, 1-1, 1-0 type match, which I think we might get.
So you got no goal scorer sitting at plus 550. I don't necessarily think this is a 0-0 game, but man, that's a hell of a number to take a shot. I really also don't mind Lukaku at plus 280. I think that's a really favorable number for him, especially in this matchup. But I think everything points to this being a low scoring game. Everything you guys said, the style of managers, the fact that, 1 point for Juve is probably a good enough result in this game for them. But at home, I think they're going to be looking for all three.
And I think conversely for Roma, if they can go to the Allianz and get a point against second place Juve, I think for them that feels almost like a victory because historically it's hard to win there. They gained some momentum beating Napoli, and it gives them a little leeway in the top four race. If you get a point off Juve, it's probably a positive point in some ways, unless you blow a lead, of course. But if you can find a way to get a point, I think in Turin against a second place Juve that's been so good, I think that'd be kind of a moral victory in some ways for Roma too. With who's it next week? Atalanta coming in next week.
Under half a goal first half plus 125. That's not bad.
It's not bad. I wouldn't mind it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think we can now shift into our locks of the week. I guess I can kick things off as I usually do. 2-1 last week, trying to keep my winning ways going as I have, I think, another 6 units I got to make up for. So I'll kick things off with a club that, maybe to borrow coach's phrase, bucks the trend here. I'm going to take Luton Town +1. Home to Chelsea, it's -130. Luton Town are currently winners of 2 in a row, so they're on the up and up just a bit. But I think the real good news is that they've really only lost by more than 1 goal just once in the last 2 months, and that was against Brentford. I think it was 3-1 at the beginning of December. But even better, at home, they've never lost by more than a goal. So by taking them to +1 here, you should be pretty safe in terms of, not necessarily losing out on the unit. Plus, it's Chelsea. Chelsea haven't looked great. We've kind of covered that at the beginning of the show. But, I think Luton Town here, they've kind of found their footing now in the Premier League. I think they've got some of the veteran presences between Townsend and Barkley in the midfield that kind of help, keep things a little bit more anchored and tight. So I'll take them +1 at home here against a Chelsea side that has really struggled to score goals, unless Nkunku really has a coming out party this weekend. So I think it's a pretty safe bet at -130. It feels like a decent value. It's my first lock.
All right. Yeah, I like it. Luton Town's becoming a problem for the big side, so I don't mind that one at all.
The new Nottingham Forest, if you will.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the whole line. All right, I'm going to go with Hellas Verona in my first one. Double chance and over 2.5 parlay at +125 against Salernitana. Hellas has started to show signs of improvement as they've clawed their way back out of the relegation zone. And despite taking a point off Milan last week, Salernitana is still the worst side in the league, and their matches usually involve goals. I like the host to win at home. I was a little skittish about taking that money line at -110, so I'm going to take the protection of the double chance. And I do think there's at least 3 goals in this one, so I'll take that combo at +125 and hopefully get a nice plus money cash here. And Hellas keeps up their improved play.
Yeah, I like that bet. I looked at Hellas as well, and that combination. One thing we talked about it offline. I know I've personally been talking about it with some of our followers. That's a pretty cool combination of bets that if you can get it to around even money, sometimes even better. That could be a good option for this Juve Roma game, right? Like if you like Juve double chance and under 3 or something like that. I don't know what it pays. But we should have talked about it in that segment. I think every book doesn't offer it. I know DraftKings does. I know we typically talk about DraftKings because it's what you guys use. It's the most widely available sports book in the country at this point. Definitely see if your book offers it, because that's a really good way to approach the bet, especially if you like an underdog or if you're just trying to get a little bit of a better number on a favorite. That double chance parlayed with an over. Good call here, Coach. And I am going to go the Scotty method of my first pick. I think I agree with his logic, and I'm going to do it in Italy. I like Frosinone +1 goal. This is my chalkiest pick in a long time. But we have to, this is not a reverse jinx. We have to start stacking some wins here. I've been going 1 and 2 for like the past month. Frosinone +1, -150 at Lazio. And I'm going to tell you why. Frosinone have not lost by more than 1 goal in their last 4, but more impressively is they've only lost by more than 1 goal 4 times all season. This is a newly promoted side. So 17 matches, 3 or 4 in the cup, to really only have like 1 or 2, or excuse me, I guess 4, because I put that down, only have 4 of those matches where they've lost by 2 goals, or I think in one instance it was 3. That's really, really impressive. They've scored in 5 out of their last 6. The other game was 0-0, so they would win a +1 in that scenario. And I think Lazio are still who they are. They haven't figured it out. They have a 0 goal differential on the season, so they've given up as many goals as they've scored. They will be missing their best player of the season, Luis Alberto. I think a 1 goal win for Lazio seems like the worst possible outcome in this scenario, so we will lay the juice. Frosinone +1, reverse jinx.
Yeah, and I'll keep the alert up because I also have a reverse jinx of my own coming up here, and that's gonna be Arsenal money line and over 1.5 at Fulham. It's -120. Look, Arsenal are rolling right now, arguably in the best form in the Premier League outside of maybe Bournemouth for whatever reason, and they get a Fulham team that's really cooled off over the holiday period. Fulham did have a pretty hot streak there where I think they scored 16 goals in 4 matches, but since then, they've lost 3 consecutive Premier League matches to Newcastle, Bournemouth, and Burnley. I don't think you really need to overthink this one. I think Arsenal are going to, take care of business. Fulham is exactly the type of team that they handle week in and week out. It's not necessarily one of those top teams that they struggle against. Arsenal's defense is as good as advertised. So it's just going to be a matter of their attacking forwards to get to. So between Martinelli, Jesus, Saka, Trossard, or Odegaard in midfield, I think they should be able to manage at least 2 in this one. So -120 with the money line, I think it's a pretty good deal.
I like it.
All right, I'm going with goals on my next one. Milan hosting Sassuolo over 3. I'm going to the Asia line with this one at -125. Sassuolo remains one of the easy over teams of the pod. Milan's defense is bleeding goals. They gave up 2 to Salernitana last week. I expect both sides to find multiple goals in this one. Over 3.5 is tempting, but I'll take the over 3 in case we get a 2-1 type match. I do see goals in this, though. I think at the worst with 3, you're going to push.
Yeah, I love this. I'm still laughing, Scott, at the reverse jinx. That caught me so off guard. It was perfect. I'm so with you on this, Coach. I think we've said on this podcast now multiple times, Sassuolo to me has the worst defense I've seen in a very, very long time, just watching them game in and game out. I think statistically now they are the worst defense in the league, so I could say that the numbers finally match up to the eye test. And Milan, man, same thing. Been talking a lot with a good friend of the podcast, Martino. And this dude is on like a 7-game streak of taking Milan overs and hitting. They just seem to hit an over in every single match. So I love this one. I'm going to go with perhaps the new team of the podcast or the old team, because you guys know we have been on Bologna for a year and a half now. They're taking on Udinese. Money line is +120. They are away, but it is a train that is full speed ahead. Finally, nice to see recognition from basically everybody in the football world for Thiago Motta, for the team he is putting together here. But we're not going to focus on Bologna in this match. We're going to focus on Udinese. They fucking stink. And I think, a team with one win so far this year, a couple of draws, plus 120 seems kind of trappy, maybe a little bit disrespectful. But I think if Bologna can take care of Roma, Inter, Atalanta in their last 3 matchups, they should not be overlooking Udinese in this one. World's most boring team, second coach already. Can't seem to find more than 1 goal in any given match. Plus money, 120, Bologna.
It's pretty crazy that Bologna are in top 4 with just 21 goals. I mean, they're far behind everybody else in the top 8, and they're even behind Frosinone and Sassuolo in terms of it. So credit to their defense, because that's really been keeping them afloat.
Yeah, defense has been outstanding. I think they play the 4-2-3-1. The guy Xerxes, he's really, really talented, but he's not, to me, like an out-and-out striker. I think he's probably more of a traditional winger, like kind of reminds me of like Memphis, like early days Memphis, like that kind of skill set, but they're trying to shoehorn him in the middle. I think they need some offensive help in January. I don't know where it comes from. Orsolini has also missed over a month worth of game time. So he's had 2 injuries. That's really hurting them. I just think they're lacking forward depth, but man, if they can get one more guy to spell Xerxes a little bit, they could really make a push to finish in that top 5.
All right. Well, I will wrap things up with my final lock of the week. I'm going with Everton, draw no bet at Wolverhampton. It's plus 105, which kind of surprised me given the form that Everton are in. They had a 4-match winning streak going on in the month of December, but it came to an end against Tottenham last weekend. They lost 2-1. They also have a tough task against Manchester City today as we record. So yesterday, as you are listening. So maybe they win, but probably not. So I view this game against Wolverhampton as kind of a get-right game. I think they'll have a little bit of a bounce back. Wolverhampton will start to lose some ground as well, because they're going to be losing Hwang to the Asia Cup as well. He plays for Korea. But I am going to take the draw no bet just in case, because as we've mentioned, Wolverhampton have been super erratic in their form. Some games they play the top teams like they are a top team themselves, and then they go ahead and lose points to a Luton Town or a Nottingham Forest. So I can see them being, up for this one for whatever reason. So I'm going to give myself that coverage with the draw no bet, even though Everton have really looked the part, certainly the last month or so.
All right, so I'm going to one of our feature matches for this one, and our only feature match really, since we did buy and sell for Premier League. It's Roma Juve. I'm going Roma double chance at Juve at minus 140. Juve is unbeaten in their last 12, like I mentioned earlier, but has conceded in 5 of their last 6. Which was somewhat of a surprise to me. Roma's coming off that huge win against Napoli at the Olimpico. I think Mourinho will have his side ready for this one with the boost of Dybala being available, even if it's as that wild card off the bench. Roma took 4 points off Juve last season. I think that fear of Juve is now gone. I think they have enough to at least get 1 point in this one, and I think Roma would probably be pretty happy with 1 point. So I could see this as being a 1-1 type match, and I'm going to take the double chance at minus 140.
So good news, bad news for you guys, because I am also on this game, but I am on the opposite side. So we cannot statistically go 10-0 this week, but we also can't go 0-10 because I like Juve money line plus 105. We talked about it. Juve have not lost in 12 matches. They've been an absolute house for the podcast this year. And I think we have to like them against an inconsistent Roma side at home at plus money. Seems like this is a match that they're really going to want. Max hasn't let them slip up yet. I think they've had more than enough time to prepare for this matchup. We talked about the boost of Dybala. They could also have a boost of Chiesa if he can come off the bench. I think Juve grinds one out in this game, man. It's not going to be pretty, but they're going to get it done. They're going to get their 1-goal win plus 105. I mean, could something crazy happen and maybe they finally score 2 or 3 goals in a game? Maybe, because we know Roma hasn't looked all that great on D, but this game just jumped out as like, how does Juve lose?
All right, and our pod lock, we're staying in Serie A this week. Remember, our pod lock is 10-5-1 plus 3.8 units on the season. Monza plus a goal at Napoli. Napoli is a mess right now, and at minus 140, we're taking this. After falling to Roma last weekend, the defending champs are now 7th and 4 points off of 4th. They enter this one down Osimhen and Politano to suspension, as well as Nathan and Lobotka to injury, all in that defeat to Roma. Now they welcome Monza, who's never an easy customer. Monza should at worst keep this one close, and a result is not out of the question for the visitors. I think at worst we get a push here, similar to our Lecce bet last week. But I do think Monza can definitely find a way to draw this match and cash this at minus 140.
Yeah, just for knowledge, the Monza's only given up 18 goals in 17 matches.
Yeah, they don't give up a lot.
They've been really, really good from that standpoint. I think they've also been kind of unlucky on some of their results. I mean, I bet against them last week. I had Fiorentina. Fiorentina did win that game 1-0, but the game was all Monza. Like if you blindly watched that game and said, who did Nick bet on? You would have thought it would have been Monza because they deserved to win and couldn't get the result. So I think they're a tough customer. This reminds me a lot of my Lazio Frosinone bet, right? You got to kind of fade a team like Napoli, who's in shambles currently. Could they still get a result? Yes. But a draw is as likely as anything. A Napoli 1-goal result seems like the worst possible outcome, and we'll take that push.
Yeah, and I'm throwing in another unofficial pick since we did one a couple weeks ago and it won. The under 2.5 I also like in this one, given the fact that Jimenez out. So throwing that out there into the universe.
You do have to remember we are undefeated currently in unofficial bets.
That's right.
All right, so that'll wrap it up for 2023. We thank you for listening, and we thank you for riding with us even through our rough couple weeks here. We promise 2024 to be more winning, less losing. At least we hope. You can, of course, find us on social media, on Twitter, all of your favorite pod platforms, and YouTube, depending on where you're listening here, if you've made it this far. And happyhoursports.net. Scotty's got his weekly Premier League piece going there. We occasionally do some other things there, as well as our Patreon page. So give us a follow at all those places. We thank you for listening, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.